Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, definitely a sensitive topic for sure.
We're looking into a recent news article that details a lawsuit with some shocking accusations of sexual assault.
Yeah, pretty shocking accusations for sure. And the people accused are
Two major figures in the music industry, Jay-Z and Diddy.
absolutely huge names, so this is going to be interesting.
Our goal, as always, is to be completely objective as we go through this.
Yeah, just laying out the facts as they're presented and trying to understand all sides.
So with that said, let's jump right in.
Okay, so we have this lawsuit filed by a woman identified as Jane Doe.
Jane Doe, okay.
Right. And she alleges that both Combs and Carter raped her at a house party back in 2000.
2000. Wow, so this is a while ago.
Yeah, quite a while ago. And to make things even more disturbing, she was only 13 years old at the time.
Oh, wow. That is young.
Yeah.
Okay, so 13 years old in 2000, and she's accusing both Combs and Carter of rape.
That's right. And the lawsuit gives some pretty specific details about the context of this alleged assault. Okay, so let's get into those details.
Well, the lawsuit claims that it all happened after Doe was driven to an after-party for the MTV Video Music Awards.
The VMAs. Wow, so we're talking about a pretty high-profile event.
Definitely a lot of celebrities and excitement surrounding something like that.
So how did she even end up at this after-party? It sounds like she was pretty young to be at something like that.
Well, that's where things get a little strange.
Okay, I'm listening.
The lawsuit states that she didn't actually have a ticket to the show or anything.
So she wasn't supposed to be there at all?
Nope. Apparently, she just started approaching limousine drivers outside the VMAs, hoping to get into either the awards show itself or an after party.
Wow, so she was just kind of winging it, hoping to get lucky.
Sounds like it. And according to the lawsuit, one of the drivers she spoke to claimed to work for Diddy Combs.
Okay, and Diddy's name is coming up right away.
Yeah, and this driver told Doe that she, quote, fit what Diddy was looking for, end quote.
Oh, wow, that's pretty bold to say to a 13-year-old.
Right, and then he invited her to a party after the awards show.
Okay, so at this point, she's met a driver who claims to work for Diddy, and he's invited her to a party. What happened next?
Well, according to the lawsuit, Doe later met up with this driver and was driven to the house party.
Okay, so she takes him up on the offer and goes to this party. But then what?
Before she could actually enter the party, she had to sign something.
What do you mean, sign something?
The lawsuit says she was told to sign what she believed to be a non-disclosure agreement.
A non-disclosure agreement. So basically, a contract saying she wouldn't talk about what happened at the party.
Exactly.
That seems really suspicious, especially considering everything else that's going on.
Yeah, it definitely raises some red flags about the kind of environment we're dealing with here.
So we've got this 13-year-old girl. She's been invited to a party by someone claiming to work for Diddy Combs. She's had to sign an NDA. And now we're at the actual party itself.
Right, and the lawsuit describes it as a pretty wild scene.
Okay, like what kind of wild?
Celebrities everywhere, drugs and alcohol freely flowing. Pretty much what you might expect from a high-profile after-party.
Yeah, I can picture it. So what happens to Jane Doe once she's inside this party?
Well, she says she was offered a drink, and after having some of it, she started to feel sick.
Okay, so maybe she was drugged.
That's not stated explicitly in the lawsuit, but it does say that she felt sick after having the drink and went to lie down in a room.
So she goes to lie down because she's not feeling well. And then what?
This is where the story takes a really dark turn.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
The lawsuit alleges that while Doe was lying down in this room, both Combs and Carter came in.
Both of them? Okay.
Yeah. She claims that Carter removed her clothes, held her down, and raped her.
Oh my God.
And to make things even worse, Combs and another unidentified female celebrity were allegedly watching this whole thing happen.
That is just awful. And what about the other woman? Was she just a bystander, or is there something more to it?
The lawsuit doesn't go into much detail about her role, but it definitely raises questions about what she knew and what she did or didn't do.
Yeah, it's chilling to think about. So Carter allegedly rapes Jane Doe while Combs and this other woman watch what happened next.
It gets even more disturbing. Doe alleges that after Carter was done, Combs also raped her.
While Carter and the other woman were still there.
That's what the lawsuit claims.
This is just horrific. It's hard to even process all of this. So she's been assaulted by both of them. And then what happens?
The lawsuit goes on to say that Combs then tried to force Doe to perform oral sex on him.
Oh my.
But she resisted by hitting him in the neck, and he stopped.
It's hard to even imagine what she must have been going through. At this point, what happens to her?
She said she left the party immediately after that.
And did she go to the police?
Not right away. The lawsuit says she called her father from a gas station after leaving the party.
So she calls her father. That's interesting. I wonder why she didn't go straight to the police.
That's a good question. Maybe she was scared or confused? It's hard to say for sure without hearing her side of the story.
Yeah, you're right. So we have this incredibly detailed and graphic account in the lawsuit, but we also have to consider the responses from Jay-Z and Sean Combs.
Absolutely. They both deny the allegations completely.
And their denials are pretty strong too, right?
Yeah, Jay-Z in particular came out swinging. He called the accusations idiotic and questioned why Doe filed a civil lawsuit instead of a criminal complaint.
Okay, so that raises another question. What's the difference between a civil lawsuit and a criminal complaint? And why would she choose one over the other?
That's a great question, and it gets into some of the legal complexities of this whole situation.
Yeah, I think a lot of people listening probably aren't familiar with the ins and outs of the legal system.
Right. So let me break it down a little bit. So
Okay.
in a criminal case, the goal is to determine if someone is guilty of a crime. And if they are found guilty, they could face serious consequences, like going to jail or paying big fines. The state is the one who initiates a criminal case. But in a civil lawsuit, it's different.
Okay, so what's different about a civil lawsuit?
Well, in a civil case, the person bringing the lawsuit is usually looking for some kind of compensation for damages that were done to them. And those damages are usually financial.
So it's about getting money for the harm that was caused.
Exactly. And it's the victim or the alleged victim who starts that process, not the state.
Okay, so in this case, Jane Doe is filing a civil lawsuit. What is she asking for?
She's seeking unspecified damages, which basically means there's no set dollar amount attached to your claim yet.
So it's not about a specific amount of money. It's more about just holding them accountable in some way.
It could be about holding them accountable.
Yeah.
And it could also be about getting some kind of financial compensation for the trauma and suffering she allegedly experienced.
So you mentioned that in a criminal case, the burden of proof is higher. What does that mean exactly?
It means that in a criminal case, the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person committed the crime.
Okay, so that's a pretty high standard.
It is. And it's much higher than the standard in a civil case.
What's the standard in a civil case then?
In a civil case, it's called a preponderance of the evidence,
Preponderance of the evidence.
which basically means that it's more likely than not that the person did what they're accused of doing.
So it's a lower bar to clear.
Yeah, for sure.
So why do you think Jane Doe decided to file a civil lawsuit instead of going the criminal route?
It's tough to say for sure, but it could be for a few reasons.
Okay, let's hear those reasons.
Well, first of all, criminal cases can be incredibly tough to win, especially in situations like this where the alleged assault happened a long time ago.
Yeah, it makes sense that it would be harder to prove something after so much time has passed.
Right. And there's also the issue of the statute of limitations.
The statute of limitations, what's that?
It's basically a time limit on how long after a crime someone can be charged.
Oh, okay, so there's a deadline for pressing charges.
Right. And those deadlines vary from state to state, and they can be pretty complex, especially for sexual assault cases.
So it's possible that too much time has passed for Jane Doe to even file a criminal complaint.
It's definitely possible. Another thing to consider is that even if she could file a criminal complaint, it doesn't guarantee that the case would be successful.
Right, just because you bring charges doesn't mean you'll win the case.
Exactly. So by filing a civil lawsuit, she might feel like she has a better chance of getting some kind of justice or resolution.
It sounds like she's trying to take control of the situation and fight for herself in the way that she feels is best.
I think that's a fair assessment.
So let's get back to the lawsuit itself. There are a lot of really specific and graphic details in there. Do you think any of those details could be particularly important from a legal standpoint?
Absolutely. Some of those details could be really significant in building her case.
Okay, like what?
Well, remember that part about her having to sign what she thought was an NDA before even entering the party?
Yeah, it seemed really strange to me.
Right. That could be a key piece of evidence because it suggests that there was an effort to keep things quiet from the very beginning.
Like they knew something bad might happen and they wanted to make sure nobody talked about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the description of the party itself.
With all the celebrities and the drugs and alcohol.
Right. That could be important too because it paints a picture of an environment where things could easily get out of control.
Yeah, like a place where people might feel pressured to do things they wouldn't normally do.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the detail about the other woman being present during the alleged assaults.
Yeah, that one really stuck with me. It makes you wonder what she saw and why she didn't do anything to stop it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Her testimony could be really crucial in this case if they can track her down and she's willing to cooperate.
It would be interesting to hear her side of the story if she's willing to tell it.
Definitely. And it also brings up the whole issue of bystanders and the role they play in situations like this.
Yeah, why didn't she intervene? Or did she try to and was unsuccessful? We just don't know.
It's a lot of unknowns, but it's something that investigators would likely be looking into.
So we have this incredibly detailed lawsuit with all these potentially important details. And then we have Jay-Z and Diddy completely denying everything. What happens next? What are the possible outcomes here?
Well, there are a few different ways this could play out.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One possibility is that both sides enter a phase called discovery.
Discovery? What's that?
Basically, it's a period of time where both sides exchange information and evidence.
So they're basically trying to learn as much as they can about each other's case.
Exactly. And that could involve things like depositions where they interview witnesses under oath.
So basically like a legal interrogation.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of.
And they can also issue subpoenas, which are legal requests for documents or other evidence.
Okay, so it's like a big fact-finding mission.
Exactly.
And then what? What happens after discovery?
Well, after discovery, there are a couple options.
Mm-hmm.
The case could go to trial, where a jury would decide whether Jane Doe has proven her case.
So it could go all the way to court.
It could. But there's also the possibility that the parties could reach a settlement before it even gets to that point.
A settlement? What's that?
It's basically a negotiated agreement between the two sides, where they come to some kind of resolution outside of court.
So they could work out a deal behind closed doors.
Yeah, and that often involves some kind of financial settlement where the defendant agrees to pay the plaintiff a certain amount of money in exchange for dropping the case.
So it's a way to avoid going to trial and all the publicity and expense that comes with that.
Right. It can be a faster and quieter way to resolve things.
So do you think this case is likely to go to trial, or do you think a settlement is more probable?
It's really hard to say at this point. It could go either way. It really depends on a lot of factors, like how strong the evidence is on both sides and how willing both parties are to negotiate.
So we'll just have to wait and see how it all unfolds.
Exactly. But if it does go to trial, it could be a really high-profile case.
Yeah, I can imagine. Especially given the fact that we're talking about Jay-Z and Diddy, two of the biggest names in music.
Absolutely. It'll be a media frenzy for sure.
And it would be fascinating to see how it all plays out in court. But what kind of evidence would even be presented in a trial like this? I mean, the alleged assault happened so long ago.
Yeah, that's one of the big challenges in cases like this.
Yeah.
After all these years, physical evidence is probably scarce if it exists at all.
So what else could they use as evidence?
Well, witness testimonies would be crucial.
So basically people who were at the party or who knew Jane Doe at the time.
Exactly. And then there's also the question of credibility. Who do you believe?
Right. I guess the jury would have to decide whether they believe Jane Doe's account of what happened.
Yeah, and they'd also have to weigh that against the denials from Jay-Z and Diddy.
It sounds like a really tough decision. And I guess there's always the risk that the jury could get it wrong.
There's always that risk in any trial. But that's why the legal system is designed the way it is, with safeguards in place to try to ensure a fair outcome.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about the potential impact of this lawsuit on Jay-Z and Diddy. What could this mean for them regardless of the legal outcome?
Yeah, that's a really important question to consider because even if they're not found liable in court, their reputations could still take a hit.
I mean, we're talking about two incredibly successful and influential people. What kind of damage could this do to their careers and their legacies?
Well, their careers could definitely be affected. They could lose endorsements or business deals, and their music sales could suffer.
I guess some people might not want to support them anymore if they believe the allegations.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And then there's the damage to their legacies. Even if they're never found guilty in court, these allegations could still stain their reputations forever.
it's like a cloud hanging over them.
Exactly. And it can be really hard to shake that off, even if they're eventually cleared of all charges.
So it's not just about the legal consequences, it's also about the court of public opinion.
Exactly. And in the court of public opinion, the burden of proof is much lower. People are quick to judge, and they often form opinions based on incomplete information.
So even if they're legally innocent, they could still be seen as guilty by a lot of people.
That's the unfortunate reality.
Yeah.
And it can be really damaging, especially for people in the public eye.
It's a reminder that words and accusations can have a lasting impact.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that this isn't just about Jay-Z and Diddy. It's about everyone involved.
Yeah, you're right. What about their families, their friends, their fans? They're all going to be affected by this too.
Exactly. And think about all the people they work with, all their collaborators, their employees, everyone who's built a career around them.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that even the most powerful people are still connected to a wider community.
And that their actions can have far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely. So it's not just about legal outcomes here. It's about the impact on real people's lives.
And it's about how we as a society deal with these kinds of situations.
You hit the nail on the head. These kinds of situations really force us to take a hard look at ourselves and our values.
What do you mean by that?
We have to ask ourselves tough questions. Like, how do we balance the presumption of innocence with the need to believe and support survivors?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is. And there's no easy answer. But it's a conversation we need to be having.
Especially now with the Me Too movement and everything, it feels like we're at a turning point in how we address these issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this case is a perfect example of how complex and nuanced these conversations can be.
It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray area.
Right. And it's important to approach these situations with empathy and understanding.
Empathy for both the accuser and the accused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to listen to all sides and be willing to have those difficult conversations.
And we need to remember that the legal system is just one part of the process.
Yeah. There's a lot that happens outside of the courtroom. And public perception can be just as powerful as any legal judgment.
So what do you think this means for Jay-Z and Diddy's legacies? I mean, they've both built these incredible careers, and they're seen as icons by millions of people.
It's tough to say for sure, but I think this case will definitely have an impact on how they're perceived moving forward.
Even if they're never found liable in court?
Even then.
Yeah.
Because the allegations alone are enough to raise questions and doubts in people's minds.
So it's like a stain that's hard to erase?
It can be.
Yeah.
And it's especially challenging for someone like Jay-Z, who has built his brand on authenticity and social justice.
Right. These accusations directly contradict that image.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if people will still see him as a credible voice in those conversations.
It's a real test of his character, and how he responds to this will be crucial.
Absolutely. And then there's Diddy. He's already dealing with other legal troubles. So this just adds another layer of complexity to his situation.
Yeah, it's hard to see how he comes out of this unscathed.
It definitely puts him in a tough spot. And it's a reminder that even the most successful people are still vulnerable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a lot of questions and a sense of unease.
Yeah, it's not a comfortable topic to discuss, but it's an important one.
And it's one that we'll continue to follow closely as it develops.
Absolutely. We'll keep you updated on any new information or legal decisions.
And in the meantime, I think it's important for all of us to reflect on what we've learned and to engage in these conversations with empathy and respect.
Couldn't agree more. These are challenging times, but they're also times of great opportunity for growth and change.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.